Hi everyone, and welcome to another video analysis session with me, Coach Micah. Today we're going to look at Jack's forehand, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let the video run in real time a couple of seconds, and then we'll actually pull Novak Djokovic in to have somebody to compare to. So let's go ahead and break it down here in details. So always looking at grips first. Jack, you have an Eastern grip, whereas Djokovic has a little bit more of a semi-Western grip, but that's perfectly fine. Always just reminding people that the grip demands the contact point, and then also, of course, the swing path up to that contact point. So I do like, again, good ready position, racket over the wrist. It's about belly button high, so that's really good. So I'll just separate the two. Let's look at Jack first here. So the unit turn is good. I like that the left hand here is very active in helping guide that racket back and facilitating that turn of your shoulder and your hip. The racket face is above the wrist the entire time. So let's look how Novak is prepping that. Same thing here. And you see that active use of the offhand. So that is really something that's really essential. Shoulder and hip turn, and both of you have a very similar degree. Now, one of the differences is if you look at Novak's racket face. So as he's taken it back, his palm, or the side that his palm is holding, is actually facing backwards. So if we look at you, Jack, here, it's looking a little bit more to the side fence. That is not a problem in itself, but by having that racket head tilted and then actually on this part of the swing looking down, you're just getting more topspin on the ball because it leads you to brushing up steeper. So if I compare that here, you're coming at the ball, I want to say almost a little bit more in the classic way. So for instance, I was taught when I was little to bring the racket back so that you could balance a penny on the upper frame there, meaning that the racket does not tilt in any way. And that is not applicable anymore. As you're coming up to your shot here, you'll actually have the racket face either completely squared up or slightly tilted this way. So slightly closed up to about 10, 15 degrees. It depends a little bit on the player. So if we're looking at Novak here, his racket face is actually a little bit closed, not monumental, but just that smidgen. So that is a little bit more of a trademark of the more modern forehand, if you will. So let's break this next piece down a little bit. So one thing that I'm seeing is that you are doing a good job getting out to the ball. You do have a nice take back. You're coming under the ball. However, it's a little flatter. So one thing could be that you're working on just closing that racket face ever so slightly, right? You don't want to have it totally closed because then you're just hitting a lot of balls into the net. However, here is one major difference that I'm seeing. You're jumping into the ball, which the jump happens if you load really, really, really energetically on that outside leg. So let's look at Novak here. There is a very significant load here, and the turn is really deep, and he will absolutely lift off, but notice where he's landing. So now he's lifting up. He's in the air at contact point, but there's still body weight going forward. And you know that it does when you see that his left foot here is actually in front of the right. So there's still more momentum going forward. And then he finishes high over his shoulder here with the elbow high and far away from his body. So if I'm comparing that to you here, you're lifting up, but now look where you are. You're actually further away from the baseline and your left foot is behind the right, which is fine if you are hitting a semi-open stance that pushes you off heavily behind the baseline. But this is a normal rally ball, and if you're lifting up, your body weight should be going forward. So again, if we look at Novak here, here's where he's lifting up at this level, and he's coming down on that same plane. Whereas you're lifting up about here, if I can come back here, about there, and then you're actually moving backwards a little bit. So that, to my mind, is one of the reasons why at some points your racket face is open and the balls are launching, because you're almost falling backwards a little bit. It's not, again, it's not major, but at your level, little nuances are really dramatic. Now, the next thing to help you from launching any balls will be that little tilt of the racket face, because it also makes it a lot easier to come over the ball, pronate over the ball, rotate over the ball. So at this stage of the swing, look at where your racket face is and look at where Novak's is. So it's a little more closed here. And you do come around, but your wrist rotation basically happens over your left shoulder, whereas Novak's is happening, boom, right here. This is where the rotation starts. So you want to brush over that ball a little bit more, and that is one of the reasons why you may feel like your balls are going up and your racket face is a little open. So I would like for that rotation to happen a little sooner, so you can create just a little bit more spin, right? So here you're still fully extended, the arm is still fully extended. This is where you're starting to rotate, and Novak just engages in that just a little bit sooner. He does have a more extreme grip than you, so that is one of the reasons, but I think that is something that you can work on, starting that racket head just slightly more down, and that will help you rotate over the ball and that weight transfer going forward. But those are the 2-3 things that I'm seeing from the side. So let's take a look at it from the back. I want to start with Novak. So he's choosing a semi-open stance, or open stance almost. Semi-open is just his right foot is a little bit further back than his left. And I do want to point out that as he's hitting right here, his left foot is stepping, but it's still stepping forward. So he's still transferring body weight forward, even though it's a semi-open forehand. And that is, to me, the biggest difference here. So this is a semi-open, and it's just a regular rally ball, so he's not necessarily lifting off the ground, but there is still more weight transfer going forward. And he's able to get under the ball and brush up to the ball. So here we see that the racket face actually at this point is facing down, and he's brushing up to the ball and then coming around. So I don't have, it's not the best footage because it doesn't have as many frames, but you really see how he's brushing around and just has the racket a little tighter. That elbow comes around a little tighter and a little sooner than your shot here. So let's look at your forehand. Again, I do like the left arm helping and bringing your hips around. It could potentially be a little deeper, that unit turn. So that is, again, you always put in the beginning of your entire shot what you want to get out of. So if you're not turning enough, if you're not loading enough, you're not going to get the energy out of the ball, and you're also not going to get as much power. Again, always more important to me, more stability onto the ball. And you just have to add extra motion to create pop. And that is usually what throws us off. So again, it's an open stance. You're using an open stance, which I'm going to comment on in a second. I do like that load here more. However, what I would prefer is that you're just getting a little bit further out here and get that outside leg more behind that ball. Because to me, it feels like you have to reach a little bit too far out. So it's still in the realm of the doable. But if you see that here, Novak is just a lot more compact on that. And one thing that I'm noticing here is you're leaning a little bit. And that tells me that you're just a little bit too far off from that ball. The other thing is you see that your head is tilting. And again, where the head goes is where the rest of the body follows, because that's where our center of balance is. So you see Novak here, he's almost ramrod straight, like a plumb line. So, and that reason for that is that he's getting that outside leg further behind that ball. And that then, of course, helps that he can come around and he doesn't have to reach as far, which makes the entire swing a little bit further away from your body. So brushing up on the bone, as you mentioned in your email to me, your racket face tends to be a little open. And I think in this shot, that is actually the case. So starting that take back here just a little bit more, just closing that racket face a few more degrees will definitely help you keep the racket head either completely level, completely straight, or even closed over the ball a little bit more. And then on the follow through, you want to use your elbow and wrist to just pronate over the ball a little bit more. So I don't want to say go full on windshield wiper, but just introduce a little bit more of that element into it, because that allows you to give more topspin, and that way you can just swing faster, which makes the whole ball a little more aggressive. And you see that here with your feet, right? So you do have a semi-open stance. Your right foot is slightly behind the right, if I were to draw a line through your left foot, and we see that here with Novak as well. I don't want to draw it into the wheels down here. When you're ending though, see where your body weight is going? It's going almost more this direction, whereas with Novak, even if he's having his foot off the ground, it's still transferring forward a little bit more. So I'm absolutely fine with your right hip coming into the shot. It has to. It actually precedes the contact point slightly, but I think you're almost ripping it around a little bit too much. And that gives you the energy going a little bit more into a sideways, into a lateral movement instead of going forward. And then let's finish up with your follow through here. You eventually do come around and the racket face is pointing to the outside. Perfect. That's exactly where it needs to be. Just as Novak's coming all the way over his shoulder. The difference again, that elbow is a little higher and it is pointing to his hitting partner. Whereas yours is not very high and probably comes around here now. But that's a lot later, and that could probably help you if you focus on that to just get that racket face around a little bit quicker. One other thing that you can do to facilitate the weight transfer forward is to actually use your close stance on a few balls. So if I'm seeing here that that most balls that you're hitting here, the balls are bouncing around the service line. So to my mind, those are fairly short balls. And those are the ones where you could step in with a closed stance, which obviously makes the whole weight transfer a lot easier because you're coming from your right foot onto your left foot, and it's a more linear weight transfer rather than a circular one. So that is just one other suggestion. There are those three stances: open, semi-open, and closed stance. And I do see almost, I want to say, an overuse of the open stance or even semi-open stance. You do use these semi-open stands absolutely correctly here. However, I would suggest to use that more if you have balls that are a little deeper on the balls that are jumping around the service line. I'm still preferring a closed stance, and also that's what we're using to coach our high performance juniors, meaning nationally ranked juniors, because that is still a part of tennis, even though the modern tennis really stresses that open stance. But to my mind, again, it's a little overused, and there are definitely opportunities for the closed stance. So those are the couple of tweaks that I'm seeing. I'm looking forward to actually also working on your backhand.